teach, and therefore we as the followers of the family of Rasul of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, al-Madrasa al-Ja'fariyya, as in reference to the Imam salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, who had again the opportunity to teach and spread knowledge. Tonight, in the first of the two parts that inshallah I will speak tonight and Saturday night, addressing the birth of the two teachers, meaning the teacher, the first teacher, أول معلم, and not in the historical chronological order, rather in terms of the level of teachings and the priority of a teacher, as a position of a teacher, the first teacher being none other than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the birth of another teacher from the children of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi afdal salawat wa tahiyyat. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Again and again we come together and celebrate and remember those personalities, and we speak about them. We try to hold their memory in high positions, in high regard, as Quran tells us, وَمَن يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ. And this is not necessarily a matter of what we call ijtihad, that we are suggesting that these are sha'air. Rather, it is a simple fact. Rasulullah is definitely more important, and his family are definitely more important than two mountains that remind us of a sacrifice of the mother of Nabiullah Ismail ala nabina wa alayhi salam, Hajar. She sacrificed and she went between those two mountains, Safa and Marwa. Therefore, God says that Safa and Marwa became sha'airullah. Inna Safa wal Marwata min sha'airillah. Therefore, you go to Hajj, you have to go and do this ritual of going between them to revive and to basically keep alive the memory of a sacrifice. And I've said this again and again, that these personalities and their sacrifices are way higher and more significant. And if the previous nations had that as an important event, in the nation of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have more significant events and more significant places, including the Medina of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Therefore, the Prophet himself, he says, if you come to Hajj and don't visit me in Medina, not just for people at his time, for people to come, for nations and generations to come, that you go to Hajj and you don't visit Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, your Hajj is incomplete. Not jurisprudentially, fiqhiyan, yes, you've completed your Hajj, you have done the checklist, if you're a checklist person. You know, we have people who are checklist people. We did Dua Kumail, checklist. We did this, checklist. That's not how it works. It's about the spirituality that we gain through this experience, through Dua Kumail, through our daily salat, through our Salatul Jumu'ah. The spirituality of Hajj is incomplete without visiting Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and Ahlul Bayt Rasulullah salawatullah wa salamu alayhim ajma'in. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. These are the sha'air. They became part of it. Therefore, we come together and remember them. Why? We discuss them, we speak about them. Why? Simply to just to congratulate each other and have some sweets and cake, and is that all what it's about? Or simply to speak about their status and praise them? which is beautiful in itself? Or is it to learn from their status and what they were and how they were and how they lived their lives and how they submitted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything that they did in their life? Therefore, we gather, remember them in order to become better. As we speak about the teachers, in order to learn. Not simply to speak about the teachers. One thing is to say, oh, my teacher, let's say somebody is in a school, aviation or something. My teacher is the one who invented I'm just an example, invented the newest engines that are used now in Boeing. Okay? Somebody, my teacher, my friend. Okay, what have you gained from that teacher? Isn't that what matters? Would somebody go with a resume that my teacher achieved so and so and get a job based on that? If you have in your resume, in your curriculum vitae, that your teacher achieved or your father achieved, would they give you a job because your teacher was? Yes, if that means that you have learned from that teacher and he certified you, he gave you some sort of a certificate, some sort of acknowledgement that you have achieved with him or her, okay, that tells us that, okay, you have done something yourself. So when we remember Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the teacher of all the world, the number one teacher, when we remember his family, especially in tonight, and as the followers of the school of Ahlul Bayt, when we remember the Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi afdal salawat wa tahiyyat, it is about learning from them. What have I gained from them? Yes, they have the knowledge. Yes, they are the best. Yes, Muhammadun khayrul bashar wa man aba فقد كفر. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. No doubt, we have no doubt that he is the best man who walked on earth. No doubt. No doubt that Ahlul Bayt are the most knowledgeable. Not only the school of Ahlul Bayt acknowledged that or admitted to that. Every historian, every narrator, you ask them who was the most knowledgeable at any given time throughout the early history of Islam, they will tell you no doubt they were the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When the father of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, who are celebrating with his father, with his grandfather Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when his father departed, meaning when Imam Baqir alayhi salam was martyred and departed his world, somebody in the funeral, in the gathering where they were, mourning and saddened by the martyrdom of Imam Baqir alayhi salam, he says the one who used to say Qala Rasulullah is gone. Meaning what? At their time, if anybody wanted to narrate anything from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, had to give a chain of narrators who he heard it from. So he had to say, for example, I heard it from Anas, who heard it from Malik, who heard it from Anas, for example, or others from other chains. Everyone had to give a chain of narrators to be accepted. When somebody had to give a hadith, they would say, okay, who did you hear it from? You can't just say a hadith. But whenever Imam Baqir alayhi salam used to say, Qala Rasulullah, nobody would say, who did you hear it from? Nobody, meaning nobody, not just the followers of the Imam, not just the lovers of the Imam, not just the Shia of Ahlul Bayt. Nobody would ask him. When he taught and his students sat and listened to him and learned from him, they never questioned where he is narrating from. So his loss was great. The man says, The one who used to say Qala Rasulullah, he's gone. In that gathering, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam was sitting, and he wanted to respond to that man and give him a good lesson. He didn't say Qala Rasulullah in this situation. In that situation, he narrated what we call Hadith Qudsi. He says Qala Allah Ta'ala, and he narrated Hadith Qudsi. And we're not speaking about Quran, but what we call Hadith Qudsi, which is a hadith from Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. So the Imam is telling him, we are Ahlul Bayt. We say Qala Allah, we say Qala. Nobody needs to ask us for authenticating our words. People trust us. We are the trustworthy ones. We are the children of the trustworthy of all times, the teacher of all times. This is the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Themselves, they had all the knowledge. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he can say Qala Allah, he can say Qala Rasulullah. Nobody can say where did you get this from. We accept it as long as we know that anything is from the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. We have no doubts about it. In the school of Ahlul Bayt, as soon as we get our chains, and this is why it's easier to have knowledge, or it was much easier for the teachers and the scholars of the school of Ahlul Bayt to have knowledge and access to knowledge and answers. And this is why the rest of the schools had to refer to the school of Ahlul Bayt, because whenever we got to them, it suffices us. If we get to Imam al-Askari alayhi salam, it's sufficient. We know that he said it, we authenticate it up to him, it suffices us. This is why in terms of knowledge and in terms of the wealth of knowledge and the strength of theology, the school of Ahlul Bayt cannot be challenged. This is a fact, and I say it again and again. We have always asked, and we are open to any theological debate, any jurisprudential debate. You go to, now in the Muslim world, Shia or Sunni, the highest scholar who is asked jurisprudentially is a school from the school of Ahlul, is a scholar of the school of Ahlul Bayt. I'm saying all of Muslims put together, the highest scholar who is regarded when it comes to fiqh in the world today is Ayatollah Sistani, Atallah Umrah. The highest, by far, in terms of people asking questions to learn about their fiqh. And that has been, or that's always been the case with the scholars of the school of Ahlul Bayt. Why? Because in the school of Ahlul Bayt we have wealth of knowledge. Wealth. We cannot be compared to any other school. And it's not based on assumption. It's not based on our opinions or even our teachers and scholars' opinions. It is based on the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam through the elaboration, the words of the Quran, obviously God and His Messenger, through the explanations and elaborations of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, especially Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi afdal as-salawat wa tahiyyat. But again, our teachers are the best. And we celebrate the birth of the two top teachers of the world. When it comes to even literacy, simple reading and writing. In Arabia, Al-Baladari, one of their historians, he says, in the al-Qura, or in the Qura, not just al-Qura, he says in Mecca, being al-Qura, the mother of the cities or the source of the cities, and the cities surrounding it. In that area, there were 17 people, not 1,700, not 17,000, we're not speaking of the hundreds of 17 people, literally, he narrates, that people, Al-Balagh is a historian, he says before Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, or before Risala, before the message, there were some 17 people who used to be able to read and write. You might say to me, there were many poets. Yes, they said poetry, but they couldn't even write it themselves. They said poetry, which is common nowadays. For instance, in many Arabic countries, they say poetry in their dialect, in their own accent. Iraqis, they say the Hesja and the rest of the types of the local poetry, okay? They have that in other parts of the world. They say it. They used to say poetry in their Arabic because they spoke the proper Arabic, or less of the broken Arabic that we have today. But not all of them were able. I know people today, I'm speaking of people I've heard myself, who say poetry, who are illiterate. I know people. Elderly people who could not read or write but said poetry. So it's not a condition that you have to be literate to say poetry. Saying poetry is beautiful. It's about being able to basically to have good knowledge of the words and put them together in a rhyming manner. Nonetheless, 17 people in the entire nation who were literate and were able to read and write. And then soon after Islam, it didn't take hundreds of years, or soon afterwards, there were thousands of people, thousands, who were not only literate, but students sitting and learning. One of the historians, he says, in Masjid al-Kufa, I counted 900 individuals in one given situation. In one situation, I counted 900 individuals teaching, meaning 900 circles, teaching in Masjid al-Kufa in circles. Now, Masjid al-Kufa is not just a small thing. It's a huge masjid. If you've been to Kufa, you know, it's a huge place with all different rooms around. That's how it was, and it had, you know, different sections. In there, he says, I counted 900 peoples teaching in circles, and all of them saying, قال الصادق عليه السلام, or قال أبو عبد الله, narrating from Imam Sadiq عليه السلام, the teacher. Now you know what we're speaking about when we are referring to a teacher or the teachers of Islam. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam came with the Quran telling people to read, ordering, commanding, iqra. God is commanding him, and he commands the people and teaches the people. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. Subhanallah, we have a good number of Muslim scholars, so-called scholars, who have little knowledge and little sense, who up until today they claim that the Prophet himself was illiterate. He could not read and write. God says to him, read. And they say, he said, I cannot read. They say. God is commanding him, read. And they say he died illiterate. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. And the best one amongst them, he said, when the Prophet was asking for the pen and paper, he says now he's hallucinating. إِنَّ النَّبِيَّ لَيَهْجُرُ لَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ مَنْ قَالَ عَلَى مَنْ قَالَهَا. Whoever said it, may God curse him. That the Prophet is hallucinating, the Prophet of God. And they claim that he could not read or write. He revolutionized the entire nation. All of Arabia was revolutionized to read and write, and to become literate, and to record God's words, and to record the messenger's words. Not only God's words, but the messenger's words, because God says, أَطِيعُ اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُ الرَّسُولِ. So they recorded God's words and they recorded the messenger's words. Although right after him they banned his words and they whipped and punished those who used to say hadith. May God deal with them the way they should be dealt with. Nonetheless, people recorded them, learned how to read and write. There was a change to the point that 900 circles, it's like saying in today's world, you have a university with 900 classes going on at the same time. A university, 900 classes going on at the same time. I don't know if the biggest universities of today's world would have that. And we're speaking of a nation that happened, or an event that took place almost 1400 years ago. Comparing it to today's population, you have to multiply by, you have to say 90 or at least 9,000 maybe. 9,000 classes. I don't think they have 900 classes in one university to say we have 9,000 now. This is what we're referring to when we speak of the Prophet and his progeny and how they changed the world and focused on education, focused on literacy, focused on progressing and moving and changing the entire nation to become focused on knowledge and information and science and technology, to the point that soon afterwards we had the biologists, we had the scientists, we had the famous Jabir ibn Hayyan, we had the many famous physicians and doctors and mathematicians. All sorts of sciences came, all from the teachings of the Prophet and his progeny, especially Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Again, the concern for me and for us should be, my dear brothers and sisters, what have we learned or are we learning from them? That should be our concern. Yes, we can speak about how good they were and how they changed the world and how their followers and their students learned so much and taught so much and changed the then world to the modern world that we know it. Rights came from there. Human rights people speak about nowadays. Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, 1400 years ago, he writes the treaties of rights. The rights of different people, anything to do with any kind of goodness, justice, science, technology, advancement, goodness for humanity came from them, progress through them. The question is, what part am I taking in that? In the betterment of humanity, in the betterment of the society, in the betterment of my own community, what part am I taking? Or am I taking any part at all? We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the opportunity to learn from the teachers of all times, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and his family, especially Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi afdal salawat wa tahiyyat. And we ask the Almighty God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to allow us to put what we learn into practice, to be studious and to teach and to put into practice what we learn. We ask Him to make us amongst those who listen to what's said and follow what's best. Let us remember on this night, on this eve of Friday, Laylatul Maghfirah, Laylatul Istighfar. Let us remember all those who passed away from our gathering, especially those who passed away recently, with the recitation of Al-Fatiha ma'a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين.